So I'm Lisa Bola. I come out of the Western region in PaTTAN, Pittsburgh. I have been honored and lucky enough to work with those. The only official announcement I think today that we need is that the internet passcode is PBIS 2023. So for those of you who may have not been here before today, this is what it is. I apologize for the move. I didn't realize it hadn't changed in the app, so we put the sign on the door, simply because you can't fit 9 people across the front in the other one. So I'll let them introduce, well, I guess I can kind of introduce them, but I have had the honor and the pleasure of working with these two teams. Connellsville's newer to me. The Connellsville team kind of sitting the 4 here on the left. We started our work together in January, and they kind of went all in February. So literally the purpose of bringing them today is to show people how you can start. So they are at the beginning of their MTSS journey in secondary. They are just kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool with 2 feet, as you'll see today, moving very quickly, trying to get some good change going. So we want, and what we thought about with the panel was, here's a team that's kind of getting themselves ready to go, middle and high school. So they are doing MTSS implementation 6 through 12. And then at the other end, the 5 people down at the other end are from the Indiana Area School District. They have a roll-up model where they have been doing MTSS systems in elementary for several years, about 5 years now, right? 5, 6 years. Yep, and so then they are seeing some of the things that are happening, right? Kids that didn't get the interventions that are now in 7 and 8, and how do we support those students? So they're rolling that support up they rolled up that support to the middle school last year. So they're coming as a little bit more of an experienced leadership team, and I'm definitely excited to get you to be able to hear both perspectives. So there are 12 questions on the screen. They will do their best to be as serious as possible. I can't promise anything, but it's a great group of people, and I'm really honored to be able to work with them. There are a couple of other people that I want to make sure that I acknowledge. Al's in the back. He works with the Indiana team. Actually, he just stopped in, worked with the Indiana area team with PBIS. We've got our other 2 IU28 consultants up here, Amanda Anderson and Nicole Kornman. They are coming in from IU28. They are part of the consultation team that works with Indiana. And I know that Catherine Poggi has been in both, Dr. Catherine Poggi has been in actually both of those districts. And I think, Scott, you've been out in Indiana too, right? Yeah, so they've leveraged a lot of, and Miss Jeannie Hertzler, of course, who's sitting over there quietly in the corner pretending. Oh, Eva too, yeah, oh, there's Eva too. I didn't even see you sneak in. And Eva's been working with the Indiana team on their PBIS framework, so you'll see how that integration has worked. So we've been very, very lucky and blessed to have a team of support, right? All right, so for those of you unfamiliar, there is a flyer handout, and I have to thank Indiana's team for sticking it in there because I didn't even think about it, into the slideshow. There is a framework. There are a couple publications that we have for secondary. It follows the same as elementary in the sense that there's 8 domains. But one of the things that we see most is the difference between secondary and elementary is that idea of like the tier 2, tier 3 supports, right? So when you are in a system that is a secondary system, what you'll see today is some conversations around some terms. And I just want to make sure those terms are clear. One thing that they'll talk about today is class-wide intervention. So class-wide intervention is done at the core with the core teacher. It's done with everybody, and it's based on a system of intervention that they have decided that more than 50% of their kids at that grade level needed help with something. So trying to intervene with more than 50% of your kids is almost impossible. So they wanted to make sure that they had some class-wide. So often we see within that model kind of a 2-tiered system, right? Kids who need an intervention that might be in addition to, but then we also see that class-wide happening with the core teachers. So they're going to talk a little bit about that. They are also both in development of their RTI model. They have a 3-tiered system that's pretty well and in effect at the Indiana school. They're building that 3-tiered system now. We're doing some major cleanup at core first out in Connellsville. And then there's a lot of conversation today. There's going to be some conversation today about professional learning. So these are all leaderships. We have 1 teacher who's sitting on the panel. We wanted to make sure that Amber could come with us. But as leaders, one of the things that they have prioritized is the coaching and professional development. And their investment in both of these as a leadership team is really what's making this incredibly effective and working well. So what we wanted to make sure is you could see that force behind it, but what they have prioritized over and above is professional learning. Secondary teachers aren't as familiar with foundational skill deficits. They don't really know. We're looking at scheduling problems that teachers don't really have the power to control. We're looking at integrated support systems because some kids are manifesting behaviors because they have reading disabilities. So we're trying to figure out all of those things back and forth. So we just want to make sure that you kind of can see the system that's in place in both of these districts. So that's you, my friend. This is so I can go very quickly, but then there'll be a quiz at the end, just in case you're wondering. So Dr. Tracy Coons is at the head of the table down here, end of the table. She's the assistant to the superintendent of schools. She does curriculum and title, and the list seems to be growing every time I get out there. And so she will be one of the panelists talking about some of the higher levels of leadership. Mr. Bosnick is the high school principal. He is the one who is implementing a significant amount of change with high school 9 to 12. His high school structure is a 9 to 12. He's got 1,200 kids there. He's got about 200 of them that head over to a comprehensive CTC. So that's kind of a dual role in some ways. And then Mr. D'Amico is sitting to his left. I was trying to remember if it was right or left because it's my right. Bosnick's left. He is the special ed director, Title 9, list keeps going, student services, list keeps going and going. So he's these are administrators in that district that have multiple hats, right? So you've seen some of that. They're not districts who get to do just curriculum or just special education. They've got lots of other responsibilities. And then Miss Amber Lilly, she is our interventionist, doing some intervention with the most significantly struggling students in the high school. She's got the kiddos that need quite a bit. So it's awesome to see. And then that's the Connellsville team. And then if we keep going down the table, because it's probably easier, right? So it's Mr. Donnie Bowers. He is currently the assistant principal at the Indiana Area Middle School. He also comes from a special education background, which is also really nice. He's done some things that I hope he talks about within that middle school. And he was at the high school in previous years. So he's got a little bit of a wide experience. Dr. Mike Minnick is the principal of the middle school. He at the junior senior high. He is joining us today. We're really excited that he can be here today. It's often hard to get two principals out of a middle school, right? So they tag team and they both came today. So I'm not quite sure what's happening. Oh, see, that worked out. All right, that's not terrible. I was like, we're just going to hope the building doesn't burn down because it is a middle school. And then Dr. Angela McMaster, she is, they've all become, I've developed great friendships with a lot of the people on the panel, but Ange and I have known each other for 10 years. We were letters trainers together, so I was super excited to be able to invite her and her team to come out. Dr. Angela McMasters is the lead psych out at, and was the former elementary MTSS coordinator, and then they brought her up to the middle school to kind of run the show in MTSS, but that's only one of the hats she wears. She does social-emotional intervention, she's doing screening, she's doing all kinds of things to identify some intensive needs. So she has a wonderful philosophy when it comes to how a school psych should perform or interact with the school districts, which is a little out of the box, which we love. And then Mr. Zahorchek is sitting to her left. He is the former special ed director. I can't ever remember what your title is now. Director of Ed. Oh, Director of Ed, there you go. And see, that's it. So he's the director of education. He's going to do curriculum. He moved over. They had they had a superintendent leave, and they all kind of shifted positions on me. But Mr. Zahorchek is one of those people that's been involved in what programs to purchase and how they've implemented things and kind of the overlapping components that are going to be dealt with in special ed. And then at the end is Mr. Heinrich. He is the superintendent of the Indiana Area School District. So, and when we met, you were Justin, director of ed. That is right. So yeah, so this is his work coming to fruition, so we're really excited. All right, I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about their school districts. There are some flag notes that are on there from Future Ready Index. I just want to make sure that they get a chance to explain where they're coming from. And it will loop likely into the first question, which is what drove the decision to implement significant change in literacy? Why did you move to the implementation of MTSS in your middle and high school? So Dr. Coons and Mr. Heinrich will be answering that question for you, but it's probably good if we just let them talk about their demographics at the same time. You're going to need your mic. Turn it on. Yeah.
It's on.
Good.
Okay. So our district is about 4,000 students. We're 216 square miles. We have 4 elementaries, a middle school, a high school, and we have a comprehensive CTC. It's our own and it's comprehensive, which is really a unique thing to have. We're not sure if there's another one in the state. We've been trying to figure that out. We also are about somewhere around 53-54% economically disadvantaged, according to the numbers that we had from prior year. And we are also approximately 23.5% special ed, and maybe if that's been updated, you can give them an update.
Do you want to talk about why you decided to do MTSS, some of the other things that were going on in the district? Answer your first question.
Okay, so in our district, we kind of knew we had a reading issue. Our high school and our middle school are both ATSI schools. And we also, Mr. D'Amico and I had originally talked earlier in last year and said, hey, maybe we should look and see how our delivery model looks and with co-teaching. So the comprehensive grant with PaTTAN came along, and we're like, oh, that's what we'll do. So when that came along and we started talking to our teachers, and we already thought about our reading issue. I had been an elementary principal for years, and I was a secondary teacher, so I always knew there was something that was going on that we needed to address. But we realized that everyone was seeing the same thing. So that is kind of how we realized we needed something systematic to put in place, and that's how we ended up starting to look at MTSS.
Yeah, Rob, you want to?
Yeah, Indiana Area School District is, oddly enough, in Indiana, Pennsylvania. It is, I like to think of us as like the perfect little balance of everything. We have a college in the middle of our town, and it's surrounded by rural America. You know, so we have a nice balance of it's suburby, but not too suburby. So there's about 2,700 kids, predominantly white. 86 or 87% white. I don't remember the other ones. 4.5%.
There's on you the screen behind.
4.4%, 2 or more races. 4.1 black. We have 2.3 Latinx, 2.2 Asian, and a few others. We get a lot of people from ESOL students from the college. Students from overseas come in to study their doctoral programs, and they bring their families. So, often that our ESL numbers go like this as the students come in and out. So, but it's a really nice community, and it has been a very nice community for a long time. And why we got into this and why we entered into our MTSS journey was we had for a long time Indiana's population was very, very steady, and it was kind of good in, good out. We had very strong family support. And the students were coming in good and, you know, leaving good, and everything seemed well, but it was really, you know, gilded. It was, you know, scratched the surface, and when you get down underneath there, you found out that we had a very strong top, but we were really losing our lower performing students. And then we dug a little deeper. We had this crazy parent who sent us a video of her child struggling to read. And it was tragic, it was heartbreaking to watch this young boy really struggle to sound out the words, and you could see how frustrated he was that he couldn't sound out the words. And she actually sent this video and a very aggressive letter to the superintendent at the time, and the superintendent hired her because she knew that something had to change. As we dug in deeper, we found that that was more the norm. We talked to some of our junior and senior high students, and they were doing fine on paper. They have A's and B's, no problem. They're going to college. They can't read. They can't sound out words. They actually would tell us, like, biology class is the worst class of my day because I can't sound out the words. So they were really, really like covering up their inability to decode words. So we did what we could to start at the bottom. We started the foundation. We worked, K to 3 first, and then into 4, 5, and now we're getting into the junior high school finally with this MTSS journey and this struggle. So, and really, that demographics piece is important because although Indiana stayed pretty strong with that, with the families and the nice mix of cultures and people, but economically disadvantaged numbers have been going up pretty significantly over the last 10 years. Over the last 10 years, we've only lost about 38 students in total enrollment, but our economically disadvantaged numbers have gone from 12% to 48% almost, so at our last number. So it shows like our teachers really didn't have all the tools in the toolbox that they needed to address students who were coming from more severe needs, coming from trauma, coming from broken homes, coming from, if the mom and dad weren't there to help them do their homework, we really didn't have an answer for that. So getting to this MTSS system was critical to address the growing needs of our community. And you didn't see it on the surface. It was hard. You had to dig underneath, but once we dug down, it became very clear. So, and then as we looked at the junior high, I think that'll come out later in conversation, but the numbers.
I think you can talk about the data now, yeah.
Well, the data bore out. I mean, so we looked at when we started this, we looked at the big data, right? The high stakes tests, what are they doing on the PSSAs? What are they doing on the Keystones? And then you look at PVAAS growth, and you could see the trend were going the wrong direction. We went from, we were at 80-some% proficient, and then every year it was headed the wrong direction. PVAAS was the same way. The growth trends were going in the wrong direction. So when we saw that, and then obviously COVID didn't help at all, so that made the curve much more steep. It became very clear that we had to do something. We had to accelerate our plans to get into junior high. So thank you to PaTTAN for making that possible, because all of our partners here in the room made that acceleration of a plan actual reality. So that's how we got started.
Yeah. Do you want, just for quick, because I'm going to ask Tracy the same follow-up, what is now installed at the elementary school?
At the elementary school, I would say that we have there's no perfect system. There's never going to be done. We're never going to be done working on it, but we have a very strong system for MTSS at our elementary school, K to 5. We have a strong common core that everyone gets. We have win time built in where students get intervention for tier 2. We have data teams that, data is the backbone of the system, so we have data teams in progress monitoring and tier 3 interventions, and we have a lead group of teachers who meet to talk about the systems and the operations. I'm sure Mr. Zahorchak will talk about that. And then we have, all of the behavioral side as well. We have school-wide positive behavior. We have tier 2 supports for students struggling with those behaviors. We have tier 3 supports. I mean, we have many of the people in the audience here today have helped us build that school-wide positive behavior, so thank you to you all. So we have as close to a complete MTSS triangle as I've seen in my career, which we're very, very proud of. So it's really, really well, and that's a testament to the work of these people to my right, because they did a lot of the hard lifting. So, but yeah, we're very proud of that, and that's what we want to build at the junior high. We've just started. We're only about a year and a couple months into it, really. But that's the goal, right? We want to take what we did at the elementary and build that system. And we get this pushback all the time, and probably all over the place now, but some of our teachers are like, look, there's too many initiatives. There's too many initiatives. You have too many initiatives. We have one initiative. Build that system for support. That's it. There's one thing we do. Now, there's a bunch of little components that go with that, but, this is not, hey, we're going to try this out and see if it works. Like, we know it works. The research says it works. We just need to build it. So that's really our response to that is we have one initiative. Those little things all are pieces of that one initiative. So you got to shift your mindset from like, oh, we'll see if this fad goes away. No, it's not going away. This is the one thing we work on. It's not a fad. It's not a thing. It's the system. We're building the system. And once it took a while to get the teachers to think like that. But once they have, it's exciting to see what we can do.
So just to transition, the reason I asked the follow-up is because we in the implementing field, so TAC, PaTTAN, we look at implementation science, which means that districts and initiatives and rollouts go through 4 phases, right? So you kind of have this initial exploration phase where people are kind of feeling things out, and then you start some installing, right? So they work through these 2 installments, so the initial installment and then another level of installment, so as you get more and more proficient at it. And then in that kind of last stage, because the idea that MTSS never ends is where Indiana's kind of living, is this refinement. So it's hard to build a system that's completely perfect, and it took them 5 years to get there, to their credit. And I think they will even admit that there are some things that they're like, we could just still refine a few corners of things, correct?
Oh, absolutely. It's never going to be done. The work's never going to be done. We're always going to be working on that one thing. And every time we think we're in a good spot, we find new problems to solve, you know, so, but I think that's the work, right? And I think we keep looking at the data, we keep looking at the trends, and we have that, you know, we have a bunch of sayings, cliches that we like to say. We always say one bite at a time. We always say, hey, when you know better, you do better. You know, so when you see the data that says, hey, this is working and this isn't, you fix it. So yeah, it's never going to be done, and we know that, but we've gotten to a place where we're at least comfortable at the elementary school that we're ready to go into the secondary realm, which is a whole different set of challenges, but it's good. It's good work.
So Tracy, you want to follow up with the elementary just a little bit?
Okay, at our elementary level, we have for a very long time had RTII or WIN in K to 2. We've done that forever. So all our focus has always been there. So we discovered that we have an issue because 3, 4, and 5 was not getting the supports that they need. So that is really the direction in elementary. We're trying to target 3, 4, and 5 to figure out what implementation we need to make sure we're remediating at that place, because that is probably a lot of our reason why we're struggling with our secondary students. So.
Well, then you had some things come up in the core that you're trying to clean up.
Yeah, we have a lot going on in the core that we're trying to clean up. We know we're missing some foundational skill work, so we're also moving a lot of that, doing a lot of training for that. And it is definitely a shift. And we also had a new reading series this year, so anybody who's elementary knows that that's always a challenge. So it's a lot for elementary, but we've kind of tried to baby step elementary a little bit while we're working with secondary to try to take care of the needs that are there, that are immediate and had urgency right now.
Okay, all right. So this was something that, I mean, Anne's just going to talk about it because she's literally raising her hand and cannot wait to talk about this. She shoved it in the document. She said, somebody needs to, yeah, so she put it into the document to share with everybody, but she's just going to talk for a little bit about her experience.
All right, so I added a QR code on there, which hopefully you can scan it if you want to be able to just go right to this specific document. So I was not entirely awful in my email to the district. I'll just say that real quick. But I did say, like, I know how to help my child, but how do we help every other child that doesn't have someone at home that knows how to get them to read? And I also think until you have that experience, you don't also realize the social emotional components that go into that, where like it affects your relationship with your child and just so many variables. And so I felt very, very passionate about the work for that reason. And I also have always just wanted to make things better for all kids. And so I feel like I finally found my people because it's definitely not something one person can do. So I wanted to share this complex change chart, which Rob actually introduced our team to, because there's a lot of emotion that comes with any change, and it can make it feel insurmountable. Like, I just can't push forward anymore because, I mean, I wasn't a fan favorite, and that was okay because I was there for the kids, not for the grown-ups. And this just helped take away the personal feelings that you sometimes have with emotions. So just to explain, when you go through change, across the top row, these are kind of the key ingredients that you need to have. And then down the side on the right with the gray, those are some of the feelings that we might be having. So whenever people were seeming really anxious about something, it's like, okay, well, they're missing the skills. We need to fill that in. Or like recently, I feel like we've had some frustration, and I don't know that it's frustration because we're lacking resources. I think it's like we have this awesome library of resources, and now how do we use it? And so I guess when you know better, you do better. So starting at the elementary, it was very much like coming in, and this is not how we do things. We do it this way. And I thought that everyone was going to be as excited as I was about the change, and they definitely were not. I did some of my own social experiments with doors that people wouldn't hold for me, or like not making eye contact in the hallway, but like I said, they're for the kids. So when we went to the junior high, I knew, first of all, I was new to that building, and even changing buildings, you're a new person. So no one had many experiences with me, and I felt like it was really important for them to trust me and to know that, like, there's building this knowledge of what a school psychologist does. Like, you're a school psychologist, how are you telling us how to teach? And it's not telling how to teach so much as it is that evidence-based practice. And where else are we ever that we're not using data to inform decisions? Or where else are we ever that we're not saying, like, oh, you have a 50-50 shot at survival. Do you want to take a chance, or do you want to go somewhere where you have like a 97% chance? So whenever we embarked on this, I had an awesome team of people, but we really started with the vision and the buy-in, and we did it with everyone. So we brought our whole staff together and we mixed up the groups. And Lisa ran us through an activity where we listed all of the problems we had with academics. Then we shifted and everyone listed solutions to what their peers wrote. And we did that for academics, behavior, social emotional well-being, attendance, all these things. And what was really cool is then in a subsequent training, we took all the top 3 problems and the top X number of solutions, and we let the teams come back together to rework that to say, we all identified common problems and concerns, so let's look now at some solutions that have some evidence base. So that was much broader than just literacy, but what it did is it got everyone to be like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Or students with attendance issues, and they're like, my parents just kicked me out, like, get to school. And I said, well, there are children that are putting their siblings on the elementary bus. And that person's face was like, I never thought about that. So I think that by bringing everyone together, it didn't just become a literacy initiative, because literacy, like, it was like dropping a boulder in a pond. Like, it wasn't a pebble with some ripples, it was like, here it comes. And we knew that that was going to impact everyone in the building. And if we didn't have everyone in the building understanding why we were doing what we were doing and establishing that vision for, like, we all want the same thing. So what is it that we want for our kids? So we've been able to establish that shared vision and buy-in. And so I just really encourage you, if you embark on complex change, this is one of the best tools. So even starting slow, it's actually changed the way that I feel like I approach change now. So if I ever come across Nostra, I am asking for an autograph.
Okay. I'm going to actually follow up with Mr. D'Amico. I think the other thing that we didn't really talk about in the beginning were some of the reasons that you felt it was really necessary to kind of look at. It used to be titled the comprehensive, and now it's called the systemic customized supports. So it's our SCS. I was having a lot of trouble with the language. Carol Good would be very proud of me right now that I remembered which words to say. But this was part of the
grant changed from comprehensive supports to...
It just changed title.
Okay.
Yeah, you're okay. So.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm the Director of Special Ed at Connellsville. It's really nice to be here. Basically, I started looking into supports more at the high school whenever last year we were cyclically monitored for continuous school improvement. We know that happens every 6 years in our districts, and when I went in and took a look, the last 3 or 4 monitorings, I was like, wow, we're under SSP target and corrective action for graduation and dropouts, and I wonder why. Currently we have all our kids have the ability to be co-taught in all 4 subjects at our high school. That's science, that's history, that's ELA and math, and we also had our own CTC that our students can go to from a freshman to a senior, actually juniors and seniors full time, to get that support. So I'm just sitting at home, I'm just wondering what's going on, like why these kids are quitting, why they're not graduating, and it started with the reading. That was one. Our students, the feedback we're getting is they struggle with reading, even in the co-teaching atmosphere, that setting. The second thing was attendance. We had attendance issues, and we believe it's from frustration and things. So what happened was I wrote a grant through PaTTAN, because I knew PaTTAN was really good for supports, and I wanted to take a deeper dive into our high school, specifically our co-teaching model. Currently we have 26% of our students are special ed, but we're kind of unique at Connellsville because it's different than a lot of other schools, because our SLD category is almost 5 or 6% lower than the state average. However, our OHI numbers are much higher, and including our ID numbers. So a lot of those students are out in our co-teaching settings, you know, with an intellectual disability that need more support than just a co-teach reading and a few adaptations made in class. So once we looked into this a little bit more with Lisa, we knew like the reading we were going to really hone in on reading going forward, and then implementing, you know, obviously the early warning system signs with MTSS and things. So that's basically where it kick-started. That's the goal, to increase the graduation and decrease dropout rates.
Yeah, so both teams have moved to installing early warning systems. So we're talking today a lot about literacy, but both of them have kind of also started to move towards that early warning system installation. All right, Mr. Bosnick, you're up. So we looked at data. It's just a nice transition because Nick had said, you know, we were really looking at data. And at one of our first meetings, Mr. Bosnick was really taken aback and said some really insightful things. So what were some things that surprised you, confirmed what you knew as soon as you started looking at that data in some of those meetings, and then ongoing even without our support or the IU support, because I know that we've had IU support there as well?
Well, my background is I've been the head principal for 14 years. My first year as the head principal, we were in school improvement, the highest levels. We had a distinguished educator, which, you know, as you go through that, obviously it's difficult for the school and the staff, but we made tremendous improvements. And we went, during that time as PSSA test, we got out of school improvement totally. We were so proud of the progress we made. But our English teachers back then were identifying that we have a reading problem. So even at the high school level, we began implementing reading programs such as even AR, and we used Star Reader, and our results were students were reading at a 5th grade level or below. That was the average. We actually tried to use the Davis program, Wilson's Reader, I'm sorry, just with some of our special education students, because we realized that we had some deficiencies. So during this time, you know, we did see some improvement and transition, but as things evolved, COVID hit, we really took a downturn. And over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been really tough. So during this process, we were able to look at what is our situation with attendance, behavior, academic performance. And we started breaking down all those categories, and not that we didn't realize that we had some difficult situations we needed to change, but the results their data end up being like eye-popping. Such as, and I just started trying to write some things down, that we had only 18% of our students overall in the high school attend school at 90% of the school year. And it went far as 42% miss more than 20% of the school year. So those days were just, you know, again, eye-popping in that how can someone be successful in the classroom when they're not present in school? Behavior, in my opinion, is off the charts, trying to deal with the daily rush of whatever happens and dealing with the problems in our high school. But we're trying to find ways to address and change those things. Academically, for example, currently, I would say about a month ago, we did some academic data, and we had in our freshman class, which is over 300 students, we had 71 failing math. We had 53 failing English, and together we had 169. And again, I don't know if that number's 310, 315, but we had 169 failing 2 or more classes. So you can see that there is some major changes and major things we have to work on. Some of the things that we realized through our conversations were, you know, we have our supports in there to not really help students overcome their weaknesses, their disabilities. You know, we were co-teaching a lot, but it was just in a way to try to help them be successful that day and to pass for the year. That's what our supports were, and we started realizing maybe the supports needed to change how we incorporated them, like maybe not co-teach in every area, but begin to put the supports in that we can improve reading. At a high school level, I mean, or even the staff-wise, that's a hard transition. You know, we started changing. People were worried about their jobs, where their position's going to be there. And so the transition, it has been up to this point. It's difficult. It's been some tough road to sled, I guess. But I think we're starting to realize, because we're seeing some results, we're seeing the data improve, that this is worth it. This is probably the only way that we can overcome and change these results is through improving, especially with reading, attendance and things like that, to really turn this thing around and turn it around quickly. So I believe in the high school we have, in our intervention, reading intervention, we have over 150 students in it, which is big. You know, I know that that's probably over between 7 and 11 sections of language live or rewards. I think it's 11 total.
Yeah, maybe.
So again, it's intense intervention, 2 periods, a regular education teacher and a co-teacher, and we are trying to make an impact right away in where the reading levels are fluency, comprehension, decoding, as quickly as we can. One thing that I know that kind of resonates with me is, and again, going through these things over these years, is the work is never done, and I think is a key thing to understand, and for the staff to try to understand. Probably my job maybe to do a better job of communicating it. We identify we have this problem. We're going to work at it. And then the challenge is they may change, they may adapt, they may still see significant changes or things that need to be done even in the same way. But we're never going to be, when you say that you're going through these cycles of we're always putting in a new program, that is going to constantly happen in public education, especially where we're at. That you're going to have to keep on looking for, through your data, what do you need to change? What can you do? What are our students' needs? They're going to continue to evolve.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I was so appreciative of in one of our first interactions was when we were pulling up the PVAAS and we were looking longitudinally, we started thinking CTC in high school. I think that's why Mr. D'Amico had submitted it. And what we did was we opened up PVAAS and we just kept going backwards. And we're sitting at the end of it, and they were at both ends of the table, and they both were saying, no, we got to make bigger change. They decided to make bigger change at that point. And so the data is actually up there. That is, so inside of Mr. Bosnick's building, there were 285 that had real well below accuracy problems inside of their reading. Like, so there was 154 kids, or 131 kids in that high school in 9, 10, and 11 that had below what we would consider proficient accuracy. So, and then if you look at what their fluency numbers were, they had 267. So Mr. Bosnick's reaction was, let's do everyone. Well, that also is capacity, right? So we can't necessarily do everyone, and they're making a huge dent and a huge shift in a system that is not easy to change, right? So it's not an easy to change system. And so that's, the maze numbers we're gonna start to work on next and where the next rounds of things are, but let's get through some real shifts and those kinds of things. So yeah, so I think he also had seen too, he's like, I don't know, we used to have 2 classes of AP. We used to have lots of kids in our honors program. We just don't have anyone go into those programs anymore. This explains why. We just kept losing and losing and losing. Like Mr. D'Amico had said, the numbers just kept getting smaller at the top. All right, so here we go. This is sometimes why the meat of why people come. So Amber and Angela are going to talk just a little about what interventions were selected, what was their process of looking at some of matching what the level of student need was, what was going to be received well by staff, and how could they do some of that work. So if you guys, Mr. Minnick, are you popping in there?
Question 3.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to, yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me?
I forgot, yeah. I kept going.
So from the Indiana perspective, some of the stuff that has already been stated, what surprised us, I think, going back that hasn't been stated yet was pre-COVID at the junior high level, our ELA and math scores were at 2 different ends of the spectrum. Our ELA scores were always in the blue. We showed growth, and we had a strong ELA team. And what happened was we had a ton of teachers retire from the ELA team right about the time COVID hit. And because we weren't all in school every day, there was uncertainty as to whether or not we were going to need to hire all those teachers. So we had people in temporary positions. We had difficulty finding people. So we were putting Band-Aids on the problem with personnel that wasn't identified as key fixtures for replacing really solid teachers. Part of what surprised us when we had these new people come in, there wasn't a strong ELA system in place. There were a lot of really good individual teaching practices happening that we could point toward as to why we were successful in the past. But coupled with COVID, we had this changing demographics that even those practices probably weren't poised to meet the needs of a very changing student body. So once we got to the place where we are today, where we started hiring teachers, we realized we needed to add teachers. So we were very fortunate and blessed to have the support of the board to be able to add a couple of teachers. That was a surprise that we needed to not only replace teachers, we needed to add teachers in order to implement this MTSS. Our math scores have always been a sore spot, particularly at the 6th grade level. One of the things that I've noticed in our data over the years was that although kids really dropped off at the 6th grade level, by the time they left the junior high and went to the high school, we had really trended upward and could hang our hats on their growth. But I don't know that that's so much the same anymore either. So we have these really, really difficult spots in both ELA and math. So it came as a surprise that we didn't have systems in place. But what we already knew, what the data confirmed, is that we needed to really go to work on the systems and structures, which is why we changed schedules, we hired people, new people, went to work on implementing an MTSS model. Some of the goals that we've identified, we're really drilling down at the tier 1, the core level of instruction, and how can, and part of it was mindset with those teachers, helping them recognize, even using something as a common term like tier 1, they didn't know what we were talking about, that this isn't their problem, like a learning support problem, this is our problem, and what are we doing in the core subject area, the core classroom, to address the diverse needs that we were recognizing.
If I could add to that, just like Mike said, one of the other things that were surprising to us, as he said, we had turnover with our ELA department over the years. We had great teachers, but they didn't know what they were teaching in each other's classrooms. So I think tearing down those silos and trying to bring them together and talk about the standards and who's addressing what and what grade level and how that feeds into each grade level and the skills that students are coming in with, that was something that we hit first and foremost in starting this process. So I just wanted to add that.
If I can add one more thing too, in addition to the academic, Nick talked about all the different things from attendance to behavior and academics. We definitely saw that. So not only did we see the need to add structures in the MTSS and to break down the silos, as Donnie mentioned, we went really hard at implementing a PBIS program too. We've had a great deal of support from our friends in the room and identifying core teams for both PBIS and MTSS and getting teacher buy-in. That was critical to have the right people in those core teams. But initially, when we were identifying problems coming out of COVID, I think our greatest challenge was just getting kids back into a day-to-day school program, reteaching them just how to conduct themselves in a school setting. We were overwhelmed with behaviors that first year when we went back to 5 days a week. It was just completely overwhelming. And fortunately, we had a lot of practices in the building that were really focused on incentivizing good behavior. We did Student of the Month. We had incentives for kids, luncheons, and so forth, prizes. But we didn't have a real tried and true PBIS system in a matrix. So that coupled with our MTSS, I feel like we're really poised to make significant changes moving forward. But again, we're about a little over a year in, so.
Thanks, I'm glad you guys stopped me, because I think that's, and when I met Dr. Minnick the first time, actually, I may have forgotten to eat breakfast and my stomach's growled. There we go. So when I first met Dr. Minnick, it was because he came for some SIM. So we were going to be looking at installing the strategic intervention model at the middle school to try to get a really good handle on the units and the instruction and the kind of way that we were doing, because like they said, they had found some holes. And basically in his responsiveness to the teachers, they're like, that's too much. We don't even know where to start with that. We're very new, we've got things to do. And so I think then we also had this kind of serendipitous interaction where Ange had kind of been starting to dig into some of the data. And so they did that other one first, which was really just great response from an admin to say, okay, if you're not ready for something like that, let's shift over here and try to get you ready for it. And I think that that's kind of what we're working on now, right? That's kind of what you're looking at trying to get back into the swing of things. So really excited. Okay, so then if we go to question 4, what interventions were selected to support core, so class-wide, and what was the process of matching intervention needs to student need? So things about like how many kids needed what kinds of intervention, why are the students in the classes that they're in. But you also have to, there's the structure of the classes is next, so.
Okay, so I should do that
Yep.
Okay. So that changes how I'm going to answer this question. I
can
guess.
blend
Well, I
questions.
was going to say one of the biggest things I think for me is like a non-negotiable is that everyone needs they need the core. So we're not going lower or slower, and we're not going to make assumptions that students aren't able to handle the vocabulary because they're struggling with reading. And that was something that I felt very passionate about as we were working through the data, because some of it felt somewhat uncomfortable for me sometimes, because we know moving away from really ability grouping students, that was something that was really important. And so we really focused on branding it, which is not even branding so much as it is what it is, targeted skills. And so students still bring to the table all of their unique learning experiences and idiosyncrasies and all the lovely things. But what it's really allowed us to do is ensure that everyone is having access to grade level content standards. Maybe some are working on writing this, a very long research paper of some sort, and others might be working on writing a really good sentence. Either way, the content was the biggest thing. Like, we're not making things slower or lower. Everyone gets the same, because I think being equitable is really important. But we absolutely saw that students were struggling to keep up in the area of word reading and fluency. And then we have probably 200-ish students per grade level. And so within each grade level, there were about 10 students, 10 to 12, that needed much more intensive supports. But we really worked hard to make sure that, so if you've ever been to letters trainings and you know the 4-square quadrant where you have your readers, they're good readers, comprehenders. You have some students that are struggling with language comprehension. You have some that struggle with decoding, but their language skills are really strong. And then you have those that need both areas. So that was sort of the lens we looked through when we were like, how do we ensure everyone's getting core? And I use Lisa's word enhanced, because I feel like it's enhanced core. And that's kind of the needs that are being met for everyone, regardless of whether you're an advanced learner or if you need a little extra intense. So I won't go into the specifics. Should I name the interventions we're using?
Yeah, I think it would, because you've seen it's been working.
Yeah, so for
have they
students with language comprehension difficulties that are readers, our teachers really focusing on sentence structure and sentence sense, and being able to apply those skills and strategies to understand text, and also building some of the self-monitoring that goes into reading, and using vocab surge to build up students' vocabulary skills, because that was a global need across the building. And then for students who needed more work with word reading, almost fluent, not really accurate just yet, they are participating in rewards secondary. And we also had thought maybe we were going to be starting with intermediate, and we didn't need to. So when we did all of the placement assessments, everyone placed into the rewards secondary. So that was awesome, because that also says the secondary, or the elementary doing what they were doing leading up to it, landed us there.
You were doing that at a tier 1 level with all students, or the kids who
Well,
placed
so
in
yeah,
that
we
at
probably
tier
want to
1
go into that. You wanna
Okay.
go into your, I can
Right,
fast
so
forward.
everyone received core, and then within,
There you go.
hang on a second here. Everyone receives core, and then within core, they had whatever else it was that they needed added. So, I don't know if I'm explaining that right. So basically, if you didn't need the word work, you were getting the things that you did need, but it was really streamlining it to ensure that they could get the targeted, evidence-based interventions. And the goal is to never live in a land or stay there. So progress monitoring is a part of all of the work that we're doing. And looping the students into that conversation is something that I have found to be very beneficial for them as well in all of this, because it's like, look at how much you grew. And then now when we read together, they're like, so how did I do? Am I doing better? So it's been awesome, because we've seen some really quick, rapid growth for some of our students. And so that's why I mentioned about how it kind of felt uncomfortable for me to look at being thoughtful of not ability grouping, because we know that there is no evidence to support that. We're not, and like, that's why I kept saying, like, core is core, guys. Like, everyone's getting core. We're not changing vocab We're not giving fewer. If they aren't able to read the text yet, you read the text to them. So, and engage them in the same conversations, because many of them are very capable. So what I would say is, when we made these shifts, yes, we had programs, but I also was thinking about increasing instructional intensity. So I feel like this might have been a Joe Kovaleski triangle at some point, but it's about increasing the intensity. So reduced ratio of students to teachers, increased time, increased opportunities to respond, and then that immediate corrective feedback. So, and that's where I feel like what has been reaffirming for me in this process is we have some of our most struggling readers who are volunteering now to read, who are having fewer behavior problems because for so long it was better to look like I won't than I can't. And because of coming from the elementary, I had some history with some of those students. And so that's where I feel like, okay, this is the right path. And I know that we're still using data to make decisions and we're still coaching. And that's where I think the support that comes a part of all of this is so critical to make sure that it doesn't fall to the wayside, what the expectations are that we have for kids. And I also I've gone into every classroom and I've talked about how the brain learns to read and how you don't just wake up and naturally know how to read. It's not something you just do. And it was kind of fascinating, I think, for the kids, because I feel like some of them were feeling broken. Like, I'm just not smart, I'm stupid, I can't do this. And really that had absolutely nothing to do with it. But no one had ever clarified those misconceptions for them. And because of it being junior high, one of the other things was like, and I know from our teachers too, there was concern about, we don't want to babyfy this. They're going to think this is stupid. They're going to hate it. They're not going to like it. They're not going to participate. And then I'm like, well, let's just go with it. Like, this is what we're doing. And then the teacher said to me, she goes, they love it. Like, I'm blown away by how much they love it and how I have to kind of tell them, like, tone it down a little bit when we're choral responding because there's people next to us. And so there's so much good there. And then I have an 8th grade teacher who's doing journal prompts that tie kids to their why. So she's having them do self-reflection on writing, but then she's like also having them like, what is it that motivates you? And so I feel like she's really getting that connection with the students, which is also what I heard Dr. Shin say yesterday, is how important the connection is with students. For them to do the work, and that doing the work is what's going to make things easier for them later. And I really just think that that's been one of the most awesome things being at the junior high, is that kids are of that age where you can have those kinds of conversations and they're like, oh, okay, so I can do this. So that felt really good. And the last program that I forgot to mention that we're using across the board is Step Up to Writing. So that's a part, and we're also still working on getting our core solid and steady, because I know teachers are incredible people that come up with really great instructional plans for delivery, but sometimes we need to make sure that everyone's getting at least a solid core across the board, regardless of the teacher. So
it is on. Okay, so one of the unique challenges of secondary specifically is the why behind who teachers are. So I'm a secondary teacher. I have a secret to share, and I hope this is a safe space. I did not get into teaching because I love children, right? I got into teaching because I loved history, and I loved geography, and I loved how those things work to develop culture, so that's what I was passionate about. Secondary teachers are content lovers. It's a harder sell to them to break that mindset of stop teaching content and start teaching kids. You know what I mean? So to get teachers to especially ELA teachers, I'm sorry if I offend any ELA teachers, but
yeah, I was going to say, be careful.
Wow, there's an ELA teacher, oh, I just love when we get to teach The Giver. The Giver is oh my goodness, I love The Giver. Yeah, but you have to understand that The Giver is not your job, right? The children are your job. And that shift in mindset is difficult, especially at the secondary level. And we're still working through what Tier 1 looks like in our ELA classes, because getting 6 to 8 teachers to agree on what that should be, what Tier 1 core should be, is extremely difficult. It's much more difficult at the secondary level than it is at the elementary level. We're going to get there, but it's still something we're working through because of who teachers are and why they do what they do. Sorry, just thought that was important.
No, I think it's really important, and I think just so that you know, in some of the slides, and I'll send them out to Kelly so that you can have them in the app. But the slides in there, because Ange is the queen of spreadsheets. So this is her first step. So the first step was, of course, to take data on kids, and Ange's background and being a letters trainer allowed her to add some different assessments that you may or may not see typical people doing. But she screened everybody with.
Can I just add one thing to this slide? And it's hard to see across the top. And this is where this report was actually partially generated through Linkit, which is our data warehouse, because there's multiple layers to secondary students. And I feel like at elementary, you have fewer variables that could be contributing. So what we did in looking at instructional recommendations is we didn't just look at academics, we also pulled in how many Swiss referrals have they had? Are they elevated on the SRSS in any area? Is their attendance at risk? And course failures, how many students had below performance, and so you're really looking at multiple factors. And I think what was cool is that whenever we were looking at recommendations, some of our students who had pretty significant behaviors, it wasn't for a lack of skill. And then I was like, oh, that's probably because they need challenged a little bit more. And so I felt like looking at the whole child through the lens of all of the pieces, you really have to consider academics, behavior, like is it skills, is it social emotional, is it attendance, is it all three of them? And it's really much more difficult to tease apart, which is why we pulled in so much information about students.
So she started with this kind of a spreadsheet. I just want to grab you for a second, if that's okay. Can you talk about the contrasting as to what ended up happening in Connellsville? Because Ange started with her ELA team in January. They were participating in one of the MTSS grants, or one of the MTSS training series from Dr. Collins in the spring, and they were looking at reading and trying to do some work at Reading Core. And they just started doing some screening for us. We didn't know they would be engaged, and Ange got them to do a whole lot of layers of screening. So she really got to throw, and then she just added stuff. She's like, well, what if we looked at this, and what if we looked at that? Whereas in Connellsville, Tracy had a little bit of a different approach. You want to talk about how that went?
So in the spring, we were originally looking at our code teaching classes, and we're going to screen our code teaching classes 6 through 12 with a maze. And of course I go, no, I think we need to get everybody, because I think there's an issue not only in our code teaching classes, I think it's also in our academic classes and our CP classes and our honors classes. I think we need to look at everybody. So sometime around the end of February.
No, it was March.
March. We mazed everybody 6 through 12, and then I said we probably need to do 5th grade too. So we decided to do 5th grade through 12th grade, high school, middle school, CTC, and all the elementary 5th grades. So then once we got that data, we said, oh,
It was
wait.
like 2,500 kids.
It was a lot of kids. And luckily, my title teachers at elementary said, you know what, we'll take care of 5th grade. And we pulled in help from the
Mr.
IU.
D'Amico managed to
We
grab.
pulled in teachers and very quickly trained them to do a maze. And then we also trained them then, once we had that data, who needed an oral reading fluency assessment. So we had quite a number of students who needed an oral reading fluency assessment. So it was a very rigorous amount of data collecting in a very small amount of time, but it was very beneficial because we've got a lot in place because there was urgency. When we looked at that data, we knew there was urgency, and it was the only way we could get it done. So I have to say, so many people stepped up to make that happen, and I do think it's going to benefit our kids.
Yeah, so I wanted to show the contrast, right? So here is a really well-experienced team with MTSS that's pulling in assessments and is very familiar with real specific diagnostics. I'm not saying that what happened in Connellsville is right or wrong, but they found a hole and they did it as fast as they could so they could implement something in the fall, because that was an urgency thing. And I think what Dr. Kuntz will say is she hadn't found the floor. She hadn't found how bad it was, and so now we're just cleaning it up a little bit, right? You're just cleaning it up a little bit, right? Okay, trying. So I put this in as a joke. Both teams know me very well. Do you want to talk about this one, Donnie? Or Mr. Minnick, either one, Dr. Minnick?
So
Then you might even get Nick D'Amico to say a few words.
So we spent a lot of time planning, obviously working with our ELA teams last year leading up to this, and when we started talking about how we're going to implement these interventions, we talked about buckets. And And Mike and I were in and out, obviously, in the middle school. We were, in the meetings as much as we could, but things come up. So we were in and out, and at one point we left and came back, and this is what we walked into. And there's actually, this picture doesn't do it justice because there was multiple diagrams, and it actually did look like they were developing like a nuclear weapon. So just the thought processes, the collaboration that took place, just phenomenal. And this kind of just shows, our partnership with PaTTAN and the work that our staff.
She helped draw the diagram.
And the IU and our staff, just the collaboration and the process, as you see up there, like developing these tiers, developing the interventions, how can we make this work? And then you start talking about schedule and time frames and the amount of time we need to have our students receiving these interventions and what that looks like in our typical day, even transition in between periods. There's so much that goes and is involved in this, and this is kind of just a descriptor of that. So.
Yep.
I think too, to add to that, how far the teachers came too, because you remember before we got to this point where we were joking about the nuclear diagram on the board. Remember when the grade level teams broke up and they were supposed to chart sort of a scope and sequence of the standards that they emphasized in their classes. And what was evident was just the very human nature of being afraid to step up and make a mistake in front of your peers. Two of the grade levels were really struggling to put a comprehensive scope and sequence on the whiteboard. And these are our ELA teachers, and they're wonderful people. But it was evident that they were not yet to a place where they could just freely put ideas on a board for, I don't know if it's fear of judgment or fear of making a mistake or what it was. But we went from that where we're thinking, holy smokes, do these guys even know their content standards, to, as Dawn said, we stepped back in and we literally did say, this looks like you're designing a nuclear weapon on the board here, because it was so complex, and I didn't even know what it meant. I'm looking at it and I didn't even know what we had advanced to.
You can say
but
your
that
piece.
I think
That's,
the
yeah.
point I want to make though is how important that is to acknowledge that, it takes a little while for people to step up and get to a place where they're contributing freely without fear of making a mistake, because you're going to make mistakes, without fear of putting an idea down that isn't accepted, because we throw everything we can against the board and then start picking apart how do we prioritize. So that's just part of the journey too.
I just wanted to add real quick that if anyone saw Dr. Adam yesterday, these diagrams are a trigger for me, and I'm just processing right now from Lisa. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of diagramming, and Mr. D'Amico is one of the best people for me to work with because he likes all of those diagrams to turn into this. So we take those, part of the process in both of the districts has been to take all of those kind of things and start to develop some sort of a system. And this system, and I do want to make sure that Amber gets to speak a little bit about what was it, but we kind of looked at, we did some maze, and then what are the results, and how are we going to do it, and how are the kids going to go? I think that this was Dr. Coons, Mr. D'Amico, and myself's first attempt at trying to say, what did we do here? And let's put it down on paper. And so oftentimes in MTSS, we talk about a decision tree, right? So at what point do we put a child into intervention? And then at what point does that child exit intervention? So what level of skill expectation do we have that they can move into a different group? And both systems, both teams have that going. And I think it's far more framed out in the Indiana school district simply because they have a really good solid elementary coming to them, and the numbers are smaller, right? So it's a little easier to find a system that has had time to find where their numbers are. Your system's still developing because we haven't even gotten there. They haven't even had a chance to get to everybody yet. But I'd like Amber just for a few minutes to talk a little bit about implementing her interventions. So some of the things, what do you have going on at the high school?
Let me start out with, I'm a teacher. I'm the only teacher here on this panel, and I feel completely intimidated. I'm with a team that's distinguished, and we are just starting out. I'm with my administrators here, so I do feel extremely intimidated, but Lisa told me to just talk and give you some insight from my perspective as a teacher. I feel like it's my first year teaching. I've been teaching for 11 years. I started out on the elementary. I was a learning support teacher for K through 3. I was furloughed, and then I was moved to K through 6 learning support. So I do have some elementary background, but now I'm at the high school level. Mr. Bosnick touched base on this earlier, but I approached him probably about 5 years ago and said, hey, I think we have a problem. We did implement some Wilsons because I was trained in Wilsons at that time, and then COVID hit, and everything fell apart. But we are so thankful to have Lisa with us. When she came in, it just opened so many eyes, like Mr. Bosnick said. And it was so nice to have someone that understood that, yes, we have a problem. I'm here to help you. Because I'm very passionate about literacy and helping students. So Ange has mentioned some of these. I said to Mr. D'Amico, they're saying everything I want to say. I'm going to sound redundant. But, we hit the ground running, and Dr. Coons really helped us out a lot with this as well. We did the maze. Some colleagues of mine, I'd never done a maze before. MTSS, what's MTSS? I have no idea. So when I say that I feel like a first-year teacher, I'm being sincere. But I've learned so much from Lisa and her insights. From Indiana, we were able to take our team to Indiana, and that was amazing. I hope that we can visit again because they really have a strong system in place, and there's a lot to learn from them. So a little bit about what I'm doing this year. We did the maze, it trickled down to, the oral reading fluency, and we targeted some of these students. I'm teaching 21 of the most significantly impacted students. Just to give you some perspective, I have an 11th grade student reading on a kindergarten reading level. She works a job at Wendy's. She comes in late a lot because I think that she supports her family at home. But first and foremost, when we started out this year, I sat down with each one of them. I want to build that rapport. I want to build that relationship, and that's always been important to me. I feel like students learn better when they're in a safe environment, when they have someone that they can trust, especially these students who are significantly impacted, who have been beaten down by the system. They're in 11th grade, 12th grade. They're going to enter the real world with what? What are we giving them? So we did hit the ground running, and I've seen some changes already taking place. I have a young boy who is in 10th grade who disclosed to me that his dad can't read. His dad doesn't believe in the educational system. His dad was in the special ed system, and he's now volunteering to read in class. You can just see it in his face. He has this confidence. So, we can talk about data and everything, but just seeing, the change in their personality, their confidence, at the end of the day, I know that I'm doing my job. So, yeah.
I'm just going to ask you to add, what are you teaching and what has been your experience with
the
it?
program is Language Live. I was trained a week before school started on Language Live, so it was a whirlwind. It's a really great program. Structured literacy program where our students are receiving English credits through being with me for their English classes, and part of the lesson, so it's back-to-back periods. So I have I'm in front of them, a teaching period where I'm in front of them, we're doing nouns. We're working on nouns, very simple grammar, reading, vocabulary acquisition. And then the second portion, they're working on their online dashboards and working on phonemic awareness. It's a great program because it allows me to work with these 21 students, see where they have their deficits, pull them into small groups, and really hone in on what skills they're lacking in.
You want me to feed you the last little bit? You're not done.
Okay.
I think what has been amazing for me to be able to do some coaching with Amber is also the fact that within the first month of implementing the program, she has identified a few kids, and you know where I'm leading you, so you can finish it.
A few students that are just, Language Live is too high level for them. So I'm working with Lisa on trying to help these students and how I'm going to help them. Again, I'm not as experienced as some of them. So Lisa's really been helping me out. But I'm going to be using Language Live, but I'm at the point now where I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I help the students who, I have a young boy who is more than likely dyslexic. We're having some issues with the gen ed teachers. They're writing to me, they're like, he can't keep up. So we're really trying to target this student in particular and help him.
Yeah. So we're, you're looking at multisensory stuff. And
Right.
Going back to some Wilson, that's,
Yeah.
that was really amazing because sometimes I think for me as an outside consultant, there are just people who rise to the top in your systems that you don't expect. Look for them. As an outside consultant, that's what they just kind of shift up and jump in. And when assessment was happening, she's sitting at the end of the table going, okay, we can do it, let's go. And she's kind of pulling these other 3 people with her. And she's talking about learning and being very at the beginning, but in 8 short weeks, we have quite a lot going on. So I do want to talk just a little bit, and this one's a quick one for Dr. Coons and Mr. D'Amico. How did it involve your scheduling changes and how did you address some of your staffing needs? Because that is a huge secondary barrier, right? Staff and time.
Okay, so at our middle school, we had a pretty good setup with our schedule because in 6th grade, we have, both buildings are 42-minute, 9-period buildings. At 6th grade, we have an ELA period and a reading period. So we were able to bump those back to back and block them and put rewards in. We actually have that intermediate rewards in for every student in 6th grade this year. In 7th and 8th grade, we have an ELA period, and then every other day, each kid had an enrichment period. So for any of the kids who needed support, we identified them, we butted those periods up together, made sure they had the same teacher and co-teacher, and we added rewards within those groups, but they were very specific. And then at the high school, it was more of a challenge because we knew that it would take time. Time's always your enemy. So the one benefit we had was we have our own cyber, we call FOLA. And our FOLA, we do have some teachers that monitor FOLA courses during the school day. So instead of, we had enough English periods of that we were able to manipulate the schedule, take those out, make them a supplemental, because we also offer that sometimes supplemental, and then we were able to have the double period with the amount of time that was there without adding staff. So it was an additional cost because those went to supplemental, but it didn't add any more staff. So those double periods then were targeted for specific kids who needed the intervention, so they are getting rewards.
Yeah, we did add one special ed teacher to our high school to support our rewards and language lab programs. That's all I wanted to add.
Well, I think what you pulled them from somewhere though. Your special education teachers came.
We had to look at our staffing. So we had at that point one available from the CTC, so we were able to do that. But that is the one place where we weren't able to manipulate the schedules. So, and we knew jumping in head first with as much as we were doing, we kind of left the CTC. We're gonna try to work on that next year because we already had 2 targets with the middle school and the high school and a lot going on in elementary, and it just wasn't feasible to spread ourselves that thin.
And then how did you shift the co-taught component, Nick? I think that's an important, because that's part of the story I think that's really important for people to hear.
So we just had one program basically we were offering to students, and it was co-teaching in all 4 subjects with gen ed curriculum. We switched that up a little bit. Now we offer more programming, so obviously, but we had to stop providing co-teaching in our history classes to support our rewards and language lab programs this year.
Can I comment on that? Because
absolutely, yeah.
that was a significant
the
change.
people who were there were just because
Yeah.
you were saying who's supposed to answer, so I gave you guides. If you want to kick up, that's great.
And I'm saying this ongoing because this is still in the first 9 weeks of a significant change. Even in our history classes, it was a challenge to get students to pass the class. Various reasons. But getting our staff to believe in that we're just moving resources. We're not getting rid of resources, that enabling kids to read at a higher level is going to help them to be successful across the board, including math, is still ongoing. But I'm hoping that this transition is now beginning to build our confidence in that, again, we're trying to not just get them through, we're trying to help them improve the skills that they need for life, to be successful in life. And that's to us, that's so meaningful. I have a great staff, works really hard, sincerely loves our kids, and trying to get them through again, we went through a furlough of 39 people in the district. Those scars don't go away, so trying to make that transition to realize, again, our goals and our staffing and our supports are there, they're not going away, they're just being redirected, it was a challenge. One of our big things that I know I'm super proud of, I feel like, is our district, we realized we had a significant problem. But we didn't just say, okay, we're going to start in kindergarten. We're going to work in K, and it'll eventually get to the high school. We didn't. We just said, we're going to do what it takes. That is financially, a financial commitment, a staff commitment, to make sure we are trying to help everyone, no matter what year they're at in their career, to, again, make these adjustments for their life, for their successes when they leave our school. And that was very important to, I think, all of us in the community.
And I think that follow-up question goes then down to Mr. Minnick and Dr. McMasters and Dr. Bowers and Mr. Zahorchak. We talked about the same question, right? So what were some of the implementing of interventions that you needed to do in changing scheduling, finding staffing? What were some of the things that affected you?
So
Justin hasn't answered anything yet.
I know.
Can we
Well,
get-
I was just going to
can
say
we give
one
him the
thing,
mic?
is that they have the nuclear map is what I had to go back to, because that's what they
all
had
right.
to work from to figure it out.
This is
So
true.
that
can
was
go
all I
back
wanted
the
to say.
nuclear map. Yep, that's right. Okay. I was going to say.
So when we looked at the tiers, as Ange talked about earlier, we had to take that and figure out how we can put this into our middle school schedule. And you know, when we looked at our schedule initially, we're going through with our guidance counselors, and you know, we saw the need, as Mike talked about earlier, for the ELA intervention, but we also saw the data was pointing to behavioral. We saw the math deficiencies, so we said kind of we're just going to go all in. So we completely tore apart our schedule. I could tell you the first thing we needed to do with the ELA was determine how can we put all these interventions in place when our students had 40 minutes of ELA and 40 minutes of literature. So we threw around the idea of a block schedule. So what we did for those intervention periods, and our focus initially was on the 6th grade level, but we were able to take that out to the 7th and 8th grade level too, was to incorporate a block schedule ELA class for all of 6th grade, all of 7th grade, and then some of our 8th grade that needed those tiered buckets that we talked about earlier. Additionally, we wanted to look at math and putting intervention periods in for math, so we used spring math for that, trying to help our students and just trying to address another concern, but you know, ELA being our focus, but this is something else we could look at. Behaviorally, we instituted an entire school-wide check-in, check-out system. Our PACE survey data showed that you know, students, there was a disconnect between an adult in the building. They didn't have a connection with one adult in the entire building. So what we did is we incorporated a homeroom 10-minute period and a 40-minute checkout at the end of the day, a flex period, in which we could institute PBIS. We have a fun day built in there on Friday that they can do whatever they want. If a teacher has something they want to share with the kids or a student has an idea, just to build that connection. So we tried to take our schedule and just tear it apart and you know, how can we address as many situations as we possibly could with our data, ELA being the primary focus. And you know, once we put that together, we saw the need for 2 additional staff members as well, and we were lucky enough that our board was able to support that in hiring in a new ELA and a new math teacher. So it was pretty extensive. I'd say like 180-degree flip from what we were last year to this year. So you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say those were all the structural pieces that were critical. You have to have those structural pieces in place to put the higher level thinking pieces. And from a curricular standpoint, looking at the data, the teachers had to really identify where our needs were, so they had to streamline what they were used to doing and streamlining it, and they're learning how to teach a longer block period right now. That's still a work in progress, Prior to this presentation, we were talking about discussion points at our next departmental meeting and what we're doing versus what we're not doing yet. So we're still along the, we're still on the journey of how to utilize the structural piece of an 80-minute block. Some teachers, that's a big adjustment, talking about flipping around adjustments. We're used to flying through your curriculum scope and sequence in a 40-minute period over the course of a whole school year. Now a teacher has half the number of students and twice as much of a time to plan for a lesson. And we're even going back to things that we learned back in the day when differentiated instruction was the hot topic. How do you differentiate for both ends of the spectrum of kids that are in your classroom? So the academic piece, I think, is first and foremost streamline what you're asking them to do so that there's a priority. What is the priority? And then frequent data meetings where they're reevaluating the data they're collecting and saying, how are we making progress? And what's next? That's part of what's happening today while we're here. They're supposed to be doing that in teams today. So it's a journey, though. I mean, and as Rob said at the beginning, it's not like we get to a place where we've arrived. There's continuous work. There's new issues that pop up, and people come and go. So the training piece, the communication piece, and then as Donnie intimated, the day-to-day things that pop up in a school day never stop either. Life continues to happen. So in order to keep this a priority amidst all sometimes what feels like chaos is sort of a hat trick too. You really have to stay above the chaos and make sure that we stay on point with what the priority is.
One thing too, because of the integrated system with behavior, going to the blocks, I also felt helped support some of the behaviors we were seeing in the hallways, because then there were fewer transitions, and the teachers are doing different things where they are like staggering the breaks, so the kids aren't necessarily, some teachers say like the bell's helpful for me because I know that's when they can take their break, but it just really also allowed us to address behaviors. And then the second part is that relationship piece, because the kids have more time with especially in 6th and 7th grade, with their ELA and their math teachers. It allows the teachers to not feel like they just have to rush and not have an opportunity to connect to. So I felt like those were two other pieces.
And just for your context, I think context is important. We keep pointing back to the breaks and the length of class. Prior to this shift, we ran a 9-period day, a bell schedule on a 9-period day. So kids were transitioning a lot. Kids coming in from our elementary programs were used to having half as many teachers in their school day. So that's a big adjustment. We noticed that going back to one of the first slides. What did we already know? We knew that incoming 6th graders, just getting used to life at a junior high school, that was a huge adjustment. Switching classes every 40 minutes. That may sound like a very low-level adjustment to make, but I think it is proving to have significant impact on behaviors, kids' ability to focus. You're not transitioning 9 times throughout the day. You're with an ELA teacher for 80 minutes. Then you're with your math teacher for 80 minutes. And then, of course, there were other impacts, things we had to take away from the schedule because the length of our school day stayed the same. So in order to add that much time for those 2 core subjects, we had to take some things away. But we were able to do it. It was pretty miraculous that just adding 2 teachers enabled us to extend that out through 7th grade ELA and the 8th grade, the most needy 8th grade ELA students. It was a lot more juice for the squeeze than we anticipated for adding 2 teachers.
Okay, so we have 5 questions in half an hour. So I'm going to go down to Justin because I think that this is part of your whole role in the district, and Rob was part of, kind of at the beginning, and you're transitioning, and this is where you're at now, right? So what are some of the things that you're including in that training and coaching plan to think about teacher knowledge of both MTSS and ELA and core instruction and the data and the to help get your teachers kind of up to par with what they need to know?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done as far as our professional development plan is we've included throughout the course of the year into our Act 80 and our professional development days, 5 different days throughout the course of the year where we are focusing in on 1, curriculum maintenance, but also 2, professional learning communities. And one of the things that we did differently this year from previous years was the idea of having teachers kind of select their own PLCs that they're a part of, and that we've always had the discussion of, we do programs with fidelity, but we also want to be able to provide that autonomy to teachers and staff. And I think one way that we've found giving teachers some autonomy is this professional learning community model, where teachers are working together on topics that they select. Now, those do get we kind of set the guidelines for that, but it is completely based upon their motivation, their desires, their complete thoughts. So that's been something that we've used. We've also utilized professional development through you, Lisa, and we're forever incredibly grateful for all of the work from you and PaTTAN and PaTTAN.
Yeah, that's
PaTTAN.
right. Yeah.
But no, so we've utilized some of that work just behaviorally. We've utilized Catherine, we've utilized folks, Al from the IU, Eva, and just professional development. We started off with that screener behaviorally. We've trained staff. We give staff time to do that screener with their students. We've built in the time for check-in, check-out throughout the course of the day, and we've also built out that time for teachers to be able to meet, to discuss, and look at data. So those are just some of the things. Rob, I don't know if you have anything to add with that.
Yeah, I think data is like I said before, data is the backbone of this system, right? If you're not looking at your data to make your decisions, you're not doing MTSS, right? Bottom line. So a lot of our training was focused on the data, and it seems simple, like, oh yeah, a teacher can look at their data and figure out, but it's much more complicated than that, and the way you approach data is very important. So we got some training and coaching around that. How we run our data teams was, we got some coaching from our expert friends. We focused on reflective practice, tier one. Tier one, when you have 50% of your kids that are scoring below or well below benchmark, you have a system problem, right? You don't have a teacher problem, you have a system problem. So when you have that kind of situation, you need to focus on tier one, because that's where the main problem lies. So in that, a lot of that work's focused on mindset, changing the way that people think. We keep talking about change and change and change, and teachers hate change, and we all hate change, right? But change is the only constant in this whole world, and we need to stay uncomfortable. We need to stay unsatisfied. We need to stay focused on positive change to help students, because the second you get comfortable, you don't know anything, right? The only thing you know is you don't know anything. So if you're not growing, you're dying. If we're not, Danielson says we need to be reflective in our practice. Every single teacher, every single educational professional should be reflecting on their practice and changing, which is where the PLCs come into place. Okay, what are you doing well? What does the data say you need to work on? You decide how you're going to approach this, and as a professional, reflect on your practice, find some friends that are in the same boat, and really, explore how you can improve as a professional. And changing that mindset is hard. That's an ongoing. That's another thing that's never going to be done. We're always going to be working on that mindset and having those conversations. And I think I'll stop there, because I know you.
Well, I was going to send the same question down to Connellsville as well. So, and that was their slide that they said. Sorry, I forgot to fast forward to them.
Well, I have to say that having kind of started this whole process and really digging in the spring, planning has not been easy, but we were able to train all our rewards teachers, all our language lab teachers before school started, even though it was a little quick before school started. And we also recognized that our content teachers have no idea how to support reading. We realized that. So, we're doing a structured literacy training actually on Tuesday, and the focus is the requirements that we need for structured literacy, because we have a lot of people who have those certifications and need it, but we also want to make sure we are tailoring it to what needs done in our district, and how it will help that staff. And it is definitely a challenge for the content teachers to understand their need to understand reading, because it's not something, I was a math teacher, it's not something that we were really taught that we needed to know. So I think, for us, it is a struggle constantly for them to understand what the professional development is, why the professional development is occurring and how it is going to benefit them in the classroom and to benefit their students. But you see progress. So another thing that we did with it was a little unique is we have the staff, the secondary who's teaching rewards in Language Live. We had several go, well, what do they do at the elementary? I'm like, well, guess what? I'm going to send you so you can see. So I split them into 3 groups, and we had our first group go last week, and I debriefed with them at the end of the day, and it was such a beneficial time for them because they could see what was really occurring at the elementary, so they could have a picture of what that is. So it's been an interesting journey just to try to figure out what do we need, and this year is kind of what do we need now, and hopefully we have a longer range plan. You know, when we hit benchmarking time, we're going to kind of develop a longer range plan as we move forward to next year.
So I think that the only thing that I'll add to that is both of these teams have been flexible. So we laid a plan, and the best laid plans, you know what happens to them, right? So we've got, unfortunately, like it's summertime and teachers don't want to come, or no one signs up for training. So, you know, Kath and I were supposed to be there for stuff, and we ended up canceling, and we keep trying to reschedule. But they are not only leveraging us as PaTTAN consultants, but also the IU, and they're creating internal people, internal systems, right? So the idea that they've got an MTSS coordinator that's out there doing ELA trainings with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade means that internally they're in there, they're good, they're in the right spot. These guys are talking about leveraging title to come up and help coach some of the intervention supports, having them come up and observe lessons and work on how do you say this OW phoneme. So those kinds of things are really nice to see from us from the outside, because really we're not supposed to be there forever. You know, I really like them, but it's far away from home for me. All right, so I will say this is one of the 2 priority questions as I'm looking at time. I just want to make sure that we do leave some time at the end for them to ask some questions. But the first one is just that successes and barriers. And we've talked about some of the successes, but maybe a quick moment to talk about some of the barriers would be good. And I know that Mr. Bosnick kind of referred to some of them, but.
So just successes real quick. You know, our building climate, I can just tell you, you walk through the halls, and I know Lisa, her first visit at the beginning of the year, drastic change between MTSS, PBIS, the supports we have in place throughout the day. I feel that I can truly say our building is a supportive building, and that's good to see our students are feeling that, our staff is feeling that. Successes also, we've seen progress. Kids want to read, number 1. That's first obstacle. They're showing progress. Our progress monitoring is showing increasing in their reading ability in our tiered intervention classes, so positives. So obviously, some barriers. We talked about it several times with staff. I will tell you that leading up to this year, at the end of last year, even in the summer, I had a couple ELA teachers in my office in tears because of the change, because of the mountain of work ahead, because when you look at it all as a total, it seems overwhelming. But we worked through that. We did summer trainings with them. We had support. You know, like I said, we have PaTTAN, we have the IU. You know, they're there. They're supporting our teachers. Our administration has been nothing but supportive of them and sitting in on meetings and trainings. Like, we're all committed to this. And I think that's how we've been able to overcome those barriers. Are there still some? Yeah, there are. And what it comes down to is just seeing the progress our kids are making. And that opens eyes, and we're seeing that more and more. Not just with MTSS, but you look at our PBIS. We switched to an online PBIS reward system. Students have badges. Our teachers are using it. We look at that. We reward teachers for who has the most points given out per month and things like that. Like, you know, we're looking at all this and how we can get better. And the buy-in was one of the biggest barriers, but I think we're overcoming that.
Thanks.
I think for myself is for our school, again, we're in the infancy of doing this program. I mean, we're starting, and what I'm saying to you, I see challenges, but we're still trying to build up and work through these challenges to get to success. I think some of the things that I hear from people up here, especially Indiana, because for us, getting to work with them and them being ahead of us, but looking at the systems they have in place, like going down and watching them run a meeting is an eye-opener that for myself, for example, is stop being complacent. I told you we were in corrective action. We got complacent. The things we improved on, we thought we have it done now. We're going to continue to build. You keep on doing in your classroom what you've been doing, and things changed. Challenges changed. We're now back to being unsuccessful again overall. So for me, the challenges are to try to work with the 70 plus teachers I have to realize that we can have an impact in every single classroom on these skills that our students are lacking. It's a system problem, and I'm glad Rob says that, because that kind of can help us not internalize it and make it a personal issue that one person's didn't cause this problem. But we all have a role in working together to improve it. And I think for me, that's the way to try to turn these issues around, to say that we have them, maybe we didn't control them, we didn't have a role in them, but we can still focus on improving them, is the way I think at a high school you got to look at it. We're still trying to get our students to the goal in the end of being prepared and have the skills and knowledge to be successful when they leave us. We can still get them there. Sometimes they're at different levels, as you guys all know. So I think that's the important part of being at the high school, and that's our challenges, is still trying to work through that of the staffing changes, our focus changes in some of the English classes, trying to work with our low-level performing students with disabilities, all the way up through. As I think as children have changed, our challenges of forming these relationships and starting where they're at, like getting the students where they're at and realizing our job is to still nurture them, to still build up their ability to have the skills to be successful when they leave there is still our role. It's not to just expect it, and when they don't meet it, it's their problem. In the high school we had very little supports. I had math tutoring in the morning. So I don't think we have a lot of, and we still don't, a lot of the interventions that are needed in every classroom. And then as they tier up and become more intense, do we have still the intervention built in that we can address every single need? So I think for me, those are like our constant change in public education in our district, to evolve into realizing these are our challenges that we can't look past. We have to build up our own supports for the kids that we have and the challenges we need, and identify them, realize them, accept them, and then let's start working towards trying to fix them.
So can I ask you to share about the student that came to you once he was in a course, but then he switched courses because of some of his future plans?
Yeah, we had, through our testing, realized we had a very high-performing student who was looking at high-level colleges, and his results, I had a meeting, he came in to look at scheduling, and I had a meeting with him where I pop in, and I see him there, I thought this was my chance, and we began to talk about, some of the challenges he has in his education. He realized it, and he has asked for, he didn't really want to leave the honors curriculums or college prep curriculums to go into a rewards class, for multiple reasons, as you can imagine. But he wanted to he wanted to try to overcome the issues he had, whether it was with decoding, whether it was comprehension, to try to help himself be more successful when he left there.
Yeah, so I think that was he saw that problem, and that's when I actually got a phone call about it. You're never going to believe this. What do we have to help him? Because he self-advocated for something he'd been waiting for. He's 12th grade.
Well, I think that they're talking of, listen, you've been an excellent student. You've been successful. You're looking at Patriot League schools, and he's a very good athlete, but he realizes if you can look through further along of SAT scores, if you look at some, high-end testing, that he had some deficiencies, and he himself, through even the conversations, realizes it and then is seeking it. You're right, I do, it hurts, but what can I do now to change it, to make myself put myself in a path to be more successful if I do get into these colleges, or I want these certain careers that are going to have intense secondary educations.
Thanks. Okay, so I think the last question that I think is always the big one is that you drop a stone in a pond, so to speak, when you start working on an MTSS system. And you start with one thing in mind, and then the kind of ripple effect happens. So one of the most important ripple effects, and I think, Mr. D'Amico, if we can start with you, what were some of the things as we're moving the system into special education, what are some of the implications, what are some of the things that you're seeing that are kind of popping up as we're dealing with some of this change?
We mentioned change, yeah, it's been tough. With regard to writing IEPs, we put together a 2-pager for staff that was directly involved with Rewards and Language Lab. And what we found at the high school is how we have it set up. If you have a 9th grader as a special ed teacher, you keep that student the whole way through. So we needed to meet to tweak the IEPs specifically to reflect Rewards and/or Language Live in there with justification, obviously. For the Rewards program, we were continuing with an English goal. Most of our students that are in Rewards already had an English goal that was based around their grade level content, so we were still focusing on that, but we were also choosing a goal specific to their instructional level, so we added that information as well. We also tweaked Section 8 and 9 of the IEP to reflect the type of special ed support that the students will receive. In addition to the present ed levels, we put a statement in there to justify why they need this program specifically from the ORF and the Maze comprehension testing.
You also found some things with how much time kids were spending and where they were spending time.
Are you talking about, yeah, Section 8 and 9 of the face time and place time? We really took a look at students, the special ed support that they were receiving. We did find some of our kiddos had disabilities, obviously, but we were providing additional supports to help get them through. So we're really trying to look at their reevaluations, what the recommendations are from the teams, and what the disability is, so we can provide them that specific support going forward.
That's what, yeah, the specificity matchup was kind of what I was going. Thanks. You go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so just a real quick story. When I started teaching my very first year, I was an emotional support teacher in the 3rd poorest school district in the state. And in my classroom, there was probably about 20 students in there at all time. They were either supplemental or full-time. And I remember that when my students would go back out into the regular ed classroom, they were often sent right back to me in the emotional support room. And one thing as a first-year teacher that I had always asked the guidance counselors, the school psychologist, so how is it that a student gets identified with an emotional disturbance and is in my classroom? I wasn't trying to be rude, I just really wanted to know. And what I found out in my talking with multiple people at the school district level was that it was simply a knock on the door, right? So if a teacher came down to that school psychologist's door, Angie's door, and knocked and knocked and knocked, that's how a student was identified. So I think what MTSS has done for us has been huge in avoiding mislabeling students, and I think that has had a tremendous impact. I think another thing that it has done for us, not only academically but behaviorally, is that we have built the data systems within our school district at the core level, where we have data teams that are meeting and really looking at the data to determine who needs additional support. I think that helps. I think also within our advanced tiers, when you have evidence-based programs and good solid data monitoring, progress monitoring for students, I think that has a tremendous impact on us as well. I think through that data process, we've been able to keep more of our students receiving special education inside the core programs, and we've been able to keep them in more often than we ever have. And I think lastly, behaviorally, I think it hasn't been ripple effects. I think it's been massive effects, because I think when you think about even emotional support programming, prior to us learning what, the interventions you put in place for behaviors, how do you support students academically? I think we're pretty good at that, but I think when you look at behaviors, how do we support all students? And I think through that process, we've been able to help support students behaviorally like we never have in the past. So it's not for behaviors, it wouldn't just be ripple impact. I think it's a massive impact where students are receiving the interventions and supports that they never have in the past. And I think, honestly, that's the type of work that saves lives.
And I think I'm just going to kick that one more time to Amber, because she is a case managing 20 kids and is also doing the special education coordination with the gen ed teachers as her kids are included in other classes. So I think just your perspective, and we'll kind of then go to questions if that's okay. I don't know, as a special education teacher, what have you seen as part of this changing inside of the district? What has your experience been like?
As a special ed teacher, what has my experience been like? Well, my head's been in a whirlwind. I think that it's changed my perspective on goals. Mr. D'Amico and I sat down and we talked about goals, and Lisa had some input on, I think that we were complacent. I like that word. We were just putting in goals and, using grades to kind of determine whether or not they were, meeting these goals, and that's just not working. So just being able to sit down and think specifically, what goals are we putting in place that are going to show us movement? Are these kids reaching these goals based on data, not on grades? So I think that's been eye-opening, and I'm excited to share that with my fellow special educators at the high school because I feel like we just didn't know. And I think it's opened Mr. D'Amico's eyes to, we need to make some changes. So implementing these programs not only has made an impact on the students so far, but I feel like it's going to make us better in terms of why we're there and targeting these goals and making them more specific.
Do you want to talk
Anything
about
else?
barriers?
Barriers?
Like how you're advocating for some of your students?
Yeah. And I think that Mr. Bosnick touched base on this. I think that there's just a lack of knowledge surrounding reading and literacy. And, we do need to have some more training.
Go ahead.
For-
Perfect timing.
Oh, okay.
It's perfect. Go ahead.
For our gen ed teachers and what their roles are in helping special education students. A lot of times in my experience so far, I co-teach as well. So I'm teaching the Language Live, 2 sections of Language Live. I also co-teach 10th and 11th grade English. And some of my experience has been that whenever there's a problem arises and they see that it's a special ed student, oh, that's yours. This is your problem, you deal with it. And I think that maybe these programs and some of the trainings that we're going to implement in our district is going to open the eyes of these gen ed teachers and help them to be more aware of, hey, this is my job too. These are my students. We're not segregating students. Special ed deals with special ed only, and I just deal with my gen ed students. So I think this is really going to be great for us moving forward, and I'm excited about it.
Okay. So my thought is, you've got about 10 minutes. Are there questions? We'll grab a mic. I'm going to grab yours, Lonnie. I'm not sure. Is it?
This one's for Connellsville. You mentioned co-teaching a lot. Was there previous training for your regular ed and special ed teachers on co-teaching, or is that part of your plan?
So I do have co-teaching set up, a refresher on the 12th, but you're referring to past practice with trainings. We have not had co-teaching training universally K-12 in our districts, but we have pockets in our buildings that we've offered co-teaching in the past few years.
Just to maybe build up on that, in the past, over my time in the district, and we still have, a lot of teachers that have been working in the high school a lot. We did have co-teaching, professional development years ago. I think Keystone group came in, and we tried to, model after what we thought would be successful co-teaching practices. And in that was trying to have both teachers involved in instruction as much as possible, obviously realizing one's a content expert, one is there to help deliver content in ways that all students can have access and be successful. So that was part of our challenge, but now I openly say, things are evolving. We're trying to realize the knowledge and the skills that our students don't have, or the background they don't have, and then how to build up not just their access to the curriculum now, but their ability to be successful in consuming it, I guess.
And I can also say that we have had a lot of change in admin. So keeping up with what needed to be trained on, not everybody had the background knowledge of what had been done. So like Mr. Bosnick and I have been here for like ever. So we kind of know what was done, but we also know it's been a while since we've really touched on co-teaching with any, major amount of training.
I had two questions. They kind of go together. The first one was, could you tell us a little bit about your MTSS teaming structure and protocol? As I'm sure your ELA and math teachers were used to looking at data, but as far as the other content area teachers, what did that look like for them?
So at the junior high, we have an MTSS core team, we have a PBIS core team. Some of the members go back and forth between the two teams, but we made sure to get at least one person from each department area, including our specials. Our counselors are involved. Ange is our MTSS coordinator. We have a PBIS coordinator, actually a new hire that he's coming in starting hopefully this week. So we have those two teams, but they meet bi-weekly. So our MTSS team will meet every 2 weeks. Our PBIS team meets every 2 weeks on different days. And then we have our advanced tiers team. It's a little smaller, and they'll meet also bi-weekly.
One important thing that we did that I don't know if you're an administrator or if you're a teacher, but
I'm a consultant.
A consultant, okay. One thing that we did to make sure that all the teachers were engaged is that we leveraged Act 13 to motivate and push teachers toward change. So all the teachers had to have some sort of data-driven goal in their SPM that was tied to this work. And Dr. Bowers, Mr. Bowers and Dr. Minnick we use Linkit growth data for all those teachers, so that even the teachers in the social studies and science classes, they are looking at data for growth in ELA, growth in math, growth in science, and they are driving that back to their own personal growth goals. So that then is tied to a PLC that they are working on right now as we speak, hopefully, to get that growth. So they have, as a way to get them invested in the process, we leveraged Act 13 to get them involved. Because you're right, social studies is kind of that outlier that, hey, we're okay with being okay. Just say that as a social studies teacher.
So not to interrupt you, and I'm standing behind you so you can't see me, but I do want to just talk about where Connellsville is right now with their data teaming structures. Maybe Mr. D'Amico, if you want to talk about like what the meetings are looking like, what's going on.
So we're meeting once a month, and very similar to the teams that they describe. I don't think we have as many people on our team, but we're specifically looking at the ABCs once a month right now, like I said.
So my next question then goes along with that, kind of building that knowledge of core literacy strategies, best evidence-based practices within the content areas. How are you doing that?
So that I feel like is a very much an ongoing process and something that I try to integrate into every conversation. So I always go back to, so what data do you have to support your claim first? And then what evidence-based practice can we apply to meet the student's need? So I talk often about John Hattie's work and the visible learning. And there's the one-page handout that shows the effect size for everything. So it'll show the effect size for retention, suspension, things that we know are going to have a negative impact on achievement. So that was a really useful way because they were like, oh, wow, like I didn't realize that maybe homework didn't have as much of an impact as what I thought it did. Or so it was kind of like just sort of slow drip learning and trickling in the strategies. And I was just sharing with someone, I did a quick PD with our elementary on effect size and what that means and how to interpret it, because stats are stats. And one of the examples was if you have teachers who believe in the kids and in the system and have the data to support that it's changing, it has the effect size of like 1.57. So it's really kind of choosing those advanced strategies and also showing teachers that it can be something as simple as, do you have a protocol for immediate corrective feedback? Do you have strategies you're using for increasing students' opportunities to respond? Sometimes I find things, I'm like, hey, here's a great vocabulary strategy, and I push it out to all my ELA people. Or one of our teachers is using PALS in her 8th grade. Saw tremendous gains. Students with IEPs had growth of like 20 words per minute in a month's time. And so I was like, hey, this is really working for so-and-so, so let's push this out to everyone. And you want me to help model that for you? So really doing the coaching and collaborating with the teachers. But I would say I just kind of keep bringing it to the forefront. And I always go back to the data, because then it takes the emotion away from it, because it's absolutely more of a system problem than it ever is a person problem. And I just really keep trying to pump them up in that way. Like we all just, it's the learning and growing process. And I use the medical analogy very often because the kids' lives truly depend on it. And I think that that's the part, like, I don't think any of us are willing to sacrifice half of our kids to not be successful, so.
Tracy, you want to talk about what it looks like at the beginning?
It's difficult, I can tell you that much. We're just trying to get them to understand that, you know, at this point, that content also teaches reading or has to support reading. You know, especially, he used the example of biology and the terminology and being able to break down those words so the kids can understand what they mean. I think that's a huge takeaway for a science teacher if they are willing to take it away. So those are the things that we're trying to instill in our teachers and have them understand at this point before we can really do any specific training. So that's kind of just where we're at. I mean, it is, like I said, we are just starting.
I don't have a question, but I definitely have a shout out. So I've been blessed to be in both districts from a behavior lens, and I'm a Connellsville alum, so you guys have a very big part of my heart. But I really love that both of you are embracing systems logic. And I know, you know, Justin, Mike, we've all kind of huddled around different conversations. And I know in talking with Nick, you're having those same ideas. When you stepped up and did that DSFI, the District System Fidelity Inventory, I think that it really elevated your teaming across all of your buildings. And I know that Nick and I talked about that, and I know these are things that are on the horizon. So the data logic, the time that you're protecting, the freeing up the schedules, you guys are so on your way. And I just wanted to shout it out. And congrats.
I was going to give them the last word and say you've got 1 minute to wrap up, and you can, I mean, definitely have that last word, and you know, but that's, thanks, Catherine.
I absolutely thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate that. And the last thing I will say, if you're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work and it's really hard work, it absolutely is. 100%. It is a lot of hard work, and I just want to say thank you to everyone at this table who's doing that hard work, because you know, I can tell you that there are times we have to pick each other up because they're beat down, because it is hard work. But you don't have to do it alone. And I want to return the compliment, I mean, because so many of in this room have helped us. You know, like, you know, Lisa is constantly, Nicole is constantly with us. You have come to our district numerous times. You know, Dr. Anderson, Al, you know, Mariah, everyone in this room has been a part of that. And there's Scott, you know, has come out and helped decide. And like, so there are resources out there for you. So do not be afraid to reach out to your IU. There are people who know more about this than you. And they're great resources. So lean on those resources, because when you get lost, there are a lot of people here that can help you. So thank you to all of you.
No, I can say that it is definitely a challenge. It is an enormous amount of work, and it is very difficult when you're making such big changes, but it is also very wonderful when you see people get those ahas and they're accepting and they realize the impact it's going to make and they're starting to jump on board. And I think that's a testament to our staff that they recognize that we need to do this. And I think a large majority of our staff have come along very quickly. So, I think with all that work, you get rewards.